Ladles and jelly spoons, welcome back to Badgerworks. Today, this. Now, this is a tank, as you can see. It's a tank that I've already built. It's a tank I've done a video on before. Now, you may think, why on earth has he got this? Well, I shall tell you. Without wishing to blow my own trumpet, you will know that I do work with a number of charities for various reasons. And I was recently approached by another charity. That charity being the Tank Museum at Bovington. And they have asked me, and I have obviously said yes, to help them out with a little bit of marketing. So they've sent me a list of questions that they would like me to answer. It's not just me, they've sent it to all kinds of different people. And I thought it would be interesting to go through those questions and have a little chat about them. So this video is going to be more of almost like a podcast kind of thing. So let's have a look at their questions and get started. Right, so I don't know how many of you have actually been to the Tank Museum. If you haven't, it's well worth a visit. It's in a lovely part of the world. West Country is lovely. And it's interesting, actually, because the last time I went to the Tank Museum in person, because it's quite a distance from me, was quite a few years ago. And back then, it was little more than a shed in a field, I have to say. But they have... the place is completely transformed. They've absolutely amazing what they've done with it, and it's very, very well worth a visit if you're interested in armour, which I imagine many of you are. So let's have a look at their questions and see what they have to ask. So the Tank Museum is proud of the role it has played in inspiring model makers. Many modellers tell us they were inspired to dabble in model kits having visited the Tank Museum in their younger days. Were you one of these? The answer to that actually is no. Which sounds like a pretty awful way to start, but let me elaborate. Those of you who know me will know that my experiences with armour have been more on the one-to-one scale rather than models. So yeah, I don't generally build a lot of armour, but that is something that's going to change in the future. And that leads us neatly on to the next question, or questions. We would like to know why, when and how you became a modeller. We'd like to know if it is a hobby you have denied or hidden from others, and why. Now those are very interesting questions. I started modelling when I was very young, 8-9 years old. And I started primarily with wargaming figures, Warhammer and things like that, tabletop wargaming. So lots of miniature painting, lots of building terrain and that kind of thing. Didn't really build that much in the way of actual models as such. Now, is it a hobby that I have denied or hidden from others? Well, I can understand why that's a good question, because a lot of people do hide their hobbies because they're worried about what other people will think. I mean, I have a friend, for example, who is a middle-aged man like me, and he collects dolls. And he's terrified that people will find out. And I just think, it's your hobby, mate. If you enjoy it, then good for you. But as for me, do I hide my hobby? Well, I think the answer to that is fairly obvious. No. This actually ties into one of the later questions, but I'll cover it a bit now. When I got back into modelling a few years ago, things had obviously moved on apace, and there were lots of new things that I had to learn, and I think probably the most scary thing for most people is airbrushing. People are terrified of it, and with good reason, I think, because it's quite difficult. When I first bought an airbrush, it was very difficult to find information on how to use the thing properly. There are so many people building models on YouTube and doing an amazing job. Don't get me wrong, they're fantastic modelers. But the trouble is with many of them is they'll show you what they're doing, but not necessarily how they're doing it. And that's the problem. So I spent a lot of time and a lot of effort a lot of trial and error. And that's one of the reasons I do what I do. I build all kinds of different things, as you've probably seen from my channel. And one of the things I get asked a lot when I go places, people say, oh, how did you make that? Whatever it might be. And instead of explaining 50 times to 50 different people how I did something, it's much easier to video it, put it on YouTube, and then if people say, how did you do that? You can say, go and watch the video, and if you've got questions, come back. So that's my approach to modelling. As I figure out how to do things, I make a video of it and I put it on YouTube. Now, that's not to say that the way I do it is the best way or the only way, it's just how I do it. And hopefully that's helped some people out. It certainly seems to be the case. Now, interestingly, the next question is talking about the model tanks that I am most proud of and what techniques and skills I've developed along the way. Well, as it goes, this is slightly embarrassing. I've only actually built 2 tanks, and this is one of them. So I thought I'd talk to you about this one first, because this actually does fit very nicely with the question about techniques and whatnot. Now, this is an Airfix 1/76th scale tank, and this is one of the starter kits that Airfix do, which are absolutely amazing, and especially if you can find them, as I often do, in places like Aldi and Lidl, where they sell them cheap, because they're perfect for this kind of thing, which is basically practicing techniques. Now, you may be asking yourself, why on earth is that tank painted pink, and why does it have a cat in the turret? Well, there is method in my madness. Another model that I have of a tank is one that my daughter picked, and it's one of the Meng Toon tanks, familiar with. And they're real tanks, but they're like caricatures of a real tank. And the one she's picked is a Sherman. And the picture on the box, the tank is pink and it's surrounded by cats. Now, my daughter, being a little girl, likes pink things and she likes cats. So it was a bit of a no-brainer. But what I wanted to do with it was I wanted to paint it pink, but I wanted to make it look, you know, realistic as much as possible. I always find that making something fantastical but looking realistic, that juxtaposition of the real and the fantastic is a very good one. So that's why I built this, was to practice you know, painting, shading, highlighting and weathering a pink finish. And then you may also notice it has whitewash on it. And you might say, well, why has it got whitewash on it? Well, that's because my son has a tank that he wants to build, and that is a Soviet KV-2, I think it is. And he wants to do that in winter camouflage. So hence why I've used this one again to practice that whitewash. So it was a case of painting it pink, weathering it, then whitewashing it, distressing it, and weathering it again. So killing multiple birds with one tank. So, oh, and knocking bits off of it, apparently. But never mind, we'll put that back on in a minute. So that is that. And there is one other that I've built, which I think you might be interested in. So let's go and have a look at that one. Right, so now this is the other tank model that I've built recently. This again was a subject of a series of videos, and it was a fairly basic build because it's an Airfix 1/76th scale Mark V, I think it is. This is the female version with the machine guns, but you'll notice it's on a fairly substantial base, and it also has this grille here at the front. And that's because this one has a few extra little surprises. So I think probably the easiest thing to do is if I demonstrate it for you. So if I switch it on. And hopefully you can see there, but what it's actually doing is, oh hang on, let me turn it off so you can hear what I'm saying. So yes, this one has a few extra little surprises in it. It's fitted with various practical effects. So it has sound and it has a smoke machine built into it. And I did this really just again to see if I could. Built into the base, there's a number of bits and pieces in there. There's the speaker obviously at the front. There's a programmable soundboard, a number of relays, and power supply, charging circuit, and a miniaturized smoke machine. So again, this was done more of a to see if I could do it kind of thing. So I was very pleased with how this came out. And the idea being that in future builds, we can add, lights and sounds and smoke and other practical effects just to jazz things up a bit. So I was quite pleased with that. Now, moving on. Let's see. What do you love about models? What frustrates you? And what do you do with them when they're built? Well, I think what frustrates me about models, I think the same as any of us really, it's when things don't fit together properly is always a nuisance. Little tiny fiddly bits that get eaten by the carpet monster. But I think it's one of those things, that's just part of it. If you didn't have some sort of trials and tribulations along the way, it would make the end result far less satisfying, I think. What do I do with them when they're built? Well, it really depends. Obviously, if it's a commission, then it goes to whoever paid for it. I've done a couple of charity auctions, which have come very well. So thanks again for everybody who bid on those, by the way. Or I keep them myself. There are some in my daughter's room. There are some in my son's room. There are some in the living room. They're all over the place, really. So yeah. Now, do we create alongside friends and family? Yeah, I've done some builds with my kids that you've seen that have been quite successful, and I'm hoping to do more of them actually. So it's quite funny actually because they, I think once they both did their first builds, they realised just how much goes into it, and it's not quite as easy as they thought it was going to be. But that's good. It's a good sort of learning process. So yeah, it's modelling for me it's a hobby, it's a pastime. I always like building things, making things, all kinds of different things, and modelling is just sort of one aspect of that. So moving on to the last point, which ties back into something I said earlier. It talks about modelling, people returning to modelling as a result of being stuck indoors, obviously with recent events that need no mention. And I think this is something that you see a fair bit, and it certainly was the case for me. It's men, particularly, I think, once they reach a certain age, quite often when they've retired and they're looking for something to do, and it's returning to a hobby that one had as a child. It's something you can do to, keep the hands and the mind occupied. And just basically, give you something to strive towards, if you like. It's something that you can start with very little, skill level. You can start from nothing, and sort of build your way up from there. As for me, that was exactly what happened. It was, so I've always made things, always built things, and returning to modelling was just another part of that. So, but. Yeah, I think it's a good hobby, and it's something that that more people should perhaps consider. It's something you can do on your own. You can do it with your friends. A lot of the some of the charities that I work with, like Models for Heroes and people like that, they're supplying kit to various veterans and mental health charities where people get together and they can sit around a table and build their models and talk about things and just generally take your mind off things for a little while. So yes, I think it's a very good hobby in that regard. It can be stressful at times when you're building something and it's not going according to plan. But I think that's just almost like a good kind of stress, because it's something that you can deal with. So yes, on the whole, I think modelling is a very worthwhile hobby, and certainly one that I think more people should take up, especially in these trying times. So yeah, anyway, that was just a little foray into the questions that were sent to me by the Tank Museum, and hopefully they'll be pleased with what I've come up with, and I hope you've perhaps gained a little bit of an insight from it too. So yes, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.